So hi everybody, my name's Paul Charlton, and I was fortunate to collaborate with Claire, Naomi and Claire in writing a paper in relation to their experience during the COVID-19 pandemic. I myself have been involved with research as a patient for the last 12 years now, initially cancer research, but my family has a broad and very difficult experience over the years with severe health, and so I'm a real passionate supporter of research, because that's where the answers lie. And I'm a National Institute for Health Research patient research ambassador.
And a very good one.
Well, that was the 29th of April 2021 inaugural research conference for researchers, and there were 330 participants. It was an online pandemic conference, and after that conference we emailed, because we'd crossed over in the conference in the chat door, and I had been invited to join National Institute of Health and Care Research managed recovery, research recovery for non-COVID research just that same day. So I thought, I know who I could ask for support. That sounds like Claire, because I was, oh my goodness, that's a big question to respond to.
Just to add some context to the original conference, you were speaking as a patient, and I was speaking with Claire Harris, who is a lead for research at Guy's and St Thomas's. And we've been contacted to write about the pandemic, the research team's responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. And when you think about when that was, we were only a year into the pandemic at that time. So things felt very different, didn't they? And there was so much online, and it's hard to think about that now, but it was just a very different time. And then we were contacted by the Nurse Researcher Journal, who had seen our session at the conference, and they asked if we would like to write a paper for them, which we did. And as Paul said, Paul had contacted me about something else, and I said, do you fancy joining us on our paper? And Paul said yes, so that was brilliant. And we also invited Naomi Hare, who is a research matron at Guy's and Tommy's as well. And we wanted to write about the differences between a large London trust and a smaller university hospital on the East Coast. And Paul was very much our wise words and wise ear throughout all of that. And so that's how we ended up writing together. And yeah, it's been a great experience. Well, for me, it has.
Equally. And by the 14th of May, which was 2 weeks later, we had our first online conversation, which had become by that time a collaborative mentoring meeting. Why am I being asked? What is it that I'm being asked to do? What's the purpose? Why am I being invited to a conference? Is it to simply listen to a patient experience? Is it to develop a policy question? Or is it simply to kind of invigorate the research environment with an experience which has benefited from research? So to encourage the others and to encourage yourself. But it's not always the easiest thing to do. So collaborating on a research paper as a co-author was really only possible because by then I had myself some 10 years of involvement in research. But although I wasn't stepping over a cliff edge, it was still a scary ask. That's what it was like to begin with. Nonetheless, that was hugely kind of mitigated by my confidence in nuclear. So my initial hesitation about, well, what could I bring to the table was really quite easily overtaken by the genuine enthusiasm and welcome of your team. Trusting you, yeah, but yes, this is a writing table, but I do have to think. My daughter was an extremely vulnerable adult in the family, and I had become myself concerned about the ethics of clinical decision making during the pandemic. I never ever felt separate from Honey or me and Claire.
You pointed out your feelings when you were reading what we'd written, and I think in the first or second feedbacks from the initial draft, I'm pretty sure you said something like that reading that has made me feel very tense. And then you said I suggest you try and keep that tension in your writing. So when I first said, I mean, I'm laughing now, but when I first read it, I can remember thinking, oh no, I don't want to make you feel like that. So I guess I was thinking about you in that sense, but what you did for us was help us be brave to acknowledge some of those things and to actually say, you know, this is important and it's part of the narrative and it was part of the experience. And I suppose for us it felt a bit confusing, a bit vulnerable, because we were laying our experiences on the table. You know, we spoke to colleagues in our teams when we were writing this as well, and we had great support. You know, I know for me in the R&D team there was great support about making sure that we did write about this experience. And I think that was something that you really did for us, was help us acknowledge
From
it.
my point of view, the challenge therefore of being challenged in the co-creation of this paper was, for me, what was my own authentic. These were reflections by senior research knowledge about what had happened in the real world of an extraordinarily professionally demanding and powerfully personal emotional crime. I hadn't been there. This paper was and is really, really important. What was the learning that you could reflect on and write about going forward?
For me particularly, I felt very mindful that you hadn't been in the same position as us, and I was worried about sharing some of the stories kind of out loud to you, because it felt risky in the sense that I didn't want to upset you, because we knew that you hadn't been involved in some of those things. But I just think as a team, we learned how to communicate with each other about that. And I think we really picked up when one of us felt that we couldn't have some of those conversations. We went on to a different part of the paper, didn't we? And I think we met every week for about 3 months or so, probably. Yeah. It was a lot, wasn't it? And but I think we needed that. And I think that really helped with the trust, and being able to share so openly and communicate with each other.
Compassionate leadership concept. And you had intuitively, all three of you immediately got into that space of compassionate leadership, even though Kings can actually write academic papers about it. Seeing it happen in practice for me was hugely. But I do remember clearly feeling very calm. I wanted, having a considered understanding of what I was hearing from, and trying to protect that.
I think that's exactly what you brought to us, because it was, I suppose for us it was very chaotic when we were trying to reflect, because I think some of the things we'd never said out loud until the point that we were having these conversations, and then we would feed off each other, and then you'd bring us back to the calm, and it was brilliant. It was really, really lovely to have you bring that, and I think for me you brought really kind challenge as well. So if we were explaining things around some of the decision making and balancing the ethics versus some of the operational work that needed to happen, we knew what we meant, and you were the person saying, but why? Or why did you do that and not this? And it was just a really nice challenge to make us really think about what was happening at the time, to be able to put it on paper. And I think it was a real challenge, wasn't it? So we're all very, very grateful to you for that. And I suppose the next question that we've been asked is, would you do it again?
So what's your answer to that?
In a heartbeat. not a second thought. I would love to. How about you?
Oh, exactly the same. There is nobody, globally who didn't have an interest in COVID-19. And so in terms of a patient coming to the table and actually sharing that conversation with you, probably there's many people who could have done that. But maybe when a paper has a much more specific focus, then I think one always has to be fairly certain that you're actually inviting into that conversation somebody who has lived that experience. It has made me feel proud of who I am as a patient representative in health research. It has really confirmed that my own voice has a place, that it is authentic beyond the stories that my patient and carer experience of major illness tells. So becoming a colleague in the writing of a paper, becoming a friend, maybe one day you and I can meet, Claire.
One day it will happen.
Yeah. So yes, kind of real pride in actually collaborating. Healthcare and research is you open the door and you come into this fabulous universe in which I have never found anyone who is not kind, who is not welcoming, who is not empathetic, who does not understand your experience as a patient. So patients are myriad and diverse. So asking a patient to contribute is not a problem. It's the relationship that you already built with the patient, I think, that matters. And if this patient and you have a relationship which allows you to invite them into the conversation about writing a paper, then absolutely open that door and let us in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to us about this today. And I'm really looking forward to eventually catching up in person.
Okay.
Thank
Me
you.
too, Claire. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.